For work sessions like this one, where there is no opportunity for public comment, those wishing to access the meeting can do so by watching the live stream available on our website, the broadcast on Comcast Channel 21, or by calling into one of the phone numbers listed for this meeting on the public webcast and meeting materials web page. And I am delighted to see an audience here today, which we don't always have at the 5:30 work session. So I will go through some of the safety reminders that in case of a medical emergency, an automated external defibrillator is underneath the big screen and behind Cherish and Natalie there. And in the event that we had to evacuate this room quickly, the two glass doors that lead out to the terrace, or the doors in the back, the double doors in the back, or the fast way to get out of this room. And hopefully we will not need those. And with that, I call this December 9th, 2024 City Council work session to order, and I will turn it right over to the city manager to introduce the first topic.
Thank you, Mayor. It seems fitting that on the last Monday meeting of your second term, we're finally doing some clumping of two topics together on the same night. So tonight, we're going to be talking about a couple of climate options or climate work sessions, the first one being the update on building decarb strategies, and I'm going to turn it directly over to Danielle to lead us through that conversation.
Good evening, Mayor and City Council. My name is Danielle Klinkebel, and I'm the Climate Policy Analyst with the City of Eugene. Joining me tonight is Ian Penn, the Sustainability Manager. Tonight, I'll provide an update on our building decarbonization work. I'll start by providing some background and context, and then share an update on where we're at on implementing some of the strategies that were identified through our engagement earlier this year. Before I dive in, I'd like to remind Council that there is a huge amount of work being accomplished across the city to address climate change and reduce emissions. This work is guided by the Climate Recovery Ordinance, our Climate Action Plan, and data of where our emissions come from. Those include projects focused on transportation, compact development, waste, urban forestry, and more. Staff provided a comprehensive overview of this work last March, and will provide another update this spring. We've also been very successful at securing federal funding to advance this work. This includes nearly $10.6 million in grants for the city alone, and over $30 million through Lane County and with many of our other partners, with many more grants currently being applied for. You can find more information about this in Attachment D. Today, I'll be talking about buildings because they represent roughly 1/3 of our total emissions. A quick definition on building decarbonization. Basically, it means reducing emissions from buildings through clean energy, energy efficiency, electrification, and energy recovery. In 2024, following City Council direction, staff engaged over 800 community members and close to 100 different businesses and organizations to better understand their challenges and opportunities for reducing emissions from buildings. This work resulted in identifying 6 broad themes to move forward on building decarbonization. Priorities included expanding incentives, providing education, centering equity, ensuring clean, reliable, and affordable energy, improving community resilience, and continuing to engage with the community. Within these themes, there were 16 strategies that have broad alignment across the community, and a final report on this was presented to City Council on July 10th, and is included as Attachment F. These themes and strategies directly relate to actions that were established in the CAP 2.0. They also relate to many of the city's housing goals that are established in the Housing Implementation Pipeline, the HIP. The city's housing priorities are listed here on the left, and our decarb work directly supports that work as well. For example, making existing homes more energy efficient helps to preserve those housing units. Building new homes that use clean and efficient energy produces housing that is both high quality and more affordable. Housing support services often tend to address safety, which includes better preparedness for extreme weather. and infrastructure planning can expand access to clean and renewable energy. The point I'm trying to make here is that good climate policy is also good housing policy, and our decarb work is not separate from, but integral to meeting our housing goals. You can see a more detailed crosswalk of the decarb strategies and the HIP in attachment C. So now that I've provided a bit of background, I'd like to share our progress on implementation. Council passed 2 motions at the July session. The first motion directed staff to discuss potential pathways for implementing the decarbonization strategies and to monitor regulatory actions in other jurisdictions. That is the focus of my presentation tonight. The second motion was to return for a discussion of the potential revenue sources for funding decarbonization and greenhouse gas reduction efforts. That discussion will occur tonight following a presentation by our CFO, Twyla Miller. So since that July session, staff have been identifying pathways forward. That work has included many meetings with partners, both internal and external, who may have a role in implementation. Those meetings helped us come up with an actual defined list of projects that align with their goals and identify ways that we can work together. We created a screening matrix to better define the timeline, cost, partners, outcomes, and sequencing for each project. And you can see that screening matrix in your packet as attachment B. This matrix helped staff to identify what our priorities should be. We decided to prioritize projects if the requisite partnerships and resources are ready to go, if it has a reasonably quick timeline for completion, or because it represents a first step of a bigger project that could have a large potential impact. So that list of priorities is attachment A. And within that attachment, within that list of priorities, there's 7 projects where the city is the lead, and I'd like to spend the bulk of my time now discussing those projects. So the first 3 support decarbonization in the residential sector and have to do largely with increasing people's awareness about their energy usage and available resources. Engagement earlier this year highlighted the need for a more coordinated communication strategy to elevate awareness about incentives and energy upgrades. We'd like to prioritize residential households since a majority of the rebates and tax credits made possible through the Inflation Reduction Act support upgrades in residential homes. A variety of channels will be explored to most effectively reach the general public, disadvantaged households, and contractors. The city plans to leverage some online tools, some in-person workshops, and a messaging campaign to raise awareness about those existing incentives. Number 2, through home energy auditing, homeowners can get more individualized information about opportunities that exist for them to improve energy efficiency through something called a home energy score. Right now, the city has a voluntary home energy score program in partnership with EWEB and U of O. But staff are preparing to do more specific engagement at the beginning of 2025 to better understand public opinion for making this a requirement at time of sale and time of lease. 4 Oregon cities have already passed a mandatory home energy score program at the time of listing a home for sale. Finally, we know that even with existing incentive programs, there is still going to be a substantial funding gap for most households, and more funding is needed to be able to fill that gap. Staff will continue to pursue state and federal funding opportunities, but these are not guaranteed, and they tend to be one-time funds. Tonight, finance staff will also present some opportunities that were identified by the revenue advisors. Our other 4 priorities support the commercial sector. So first, staff plan to work with specific business sectors on decarbonization to educate them about resources and provide opportunities for peer-to-peer learning. Staff are beginning with the food and beverage manufacturing industry in Q1 of 2025. Next, we have been exploring opportunities in the city's housing production and preservation programs, things like MUPD, Affordable Housing Trust Fund, and many others. Many of these currently have existing requirements for energy efficiency, but staff are researching possible new requirements specific to decarbonization to understand their viability. So, for example, potentially requiring buildings be electric ready or all electric with specific exemptions as conditions of getting those incentives. For number 6, the state recently passed new building performance standards, which will require buildings over a certain size to start benchmarking their energy usage and meet energy standards. Oregon Department of Energy is finalizing the program by the end of this year, and staff will be identifying opportunities to provide additional assistance to help businesses navigate this policy. And lastly, the city continues to make energy upgrades in its own facilities. The City Hall remodel included many energy efficiency upgrades. Roosevelt Yard and the airport recently received grants to plan and install solar and storage systems, and that work will continue this year. So I'm switching focus a little bit. Now I'd like to focus on local projects priorities that are being led by our external partners. So these represent points of alignment between their work and our decarbonization priorities. And the city is focused on tracking their progress, as well as identifying any opportunities for us to help eliminate barriers or provide additional support, because we see many of these as foundational pieces for future projects. There's just a few I'd like to point out. We are working with Beyond Toxics to expand their Bethel Clean Energy Project. This is an education and support service program that guides low-income households towards making clean energy upgrades. Staff are assisting with a grant proposal that will allow more households to participate. Lane County received nearly $20 million from the EPA this year to develop a regional network of resilience hubs. The need for resilience came up again and again in our engagement earlier this year, and Lane County plans to convene local partners, including the city, to implement that grant in early 2025. ODO, Oregon Department of Energy, is developing an online incentive navigator tool to help residents understand eligibility for rebates at the local, state, and federal levels. Staff continue to hear about the need for clarity and assistance in navigating these programs, so we are tracking closely when this launches to see what other support services may be needed. And then the last one I'd like to point out is eWeb. They are a huge part of our decarb work. They have several relevant projects underway regarding negotiating their energy portfolio with BPA, forecasting their future energy demand and possible ways to meet that demand, as well as a study to identify the best opportunities for local investments in energy efficiency. So we are tracking this work very closely to understand local implications. As directed by council, staff also continue to monitor policy developments in other jurisdictions, and we've identified these 3 areas as being the most relevant right now. The first is emissions and appliance standards, such as a NOx standard or nitrogen oxide standard. There's not a lot of movement on this right now, but several cities in Oregon are considering this. All eyes really are on CARB, the California Air Resources Board, who's working on a zero emissions appliance standard. Number 2, more cities are starting to pilot geothermal energy networks. For those who aren't familiar with this concept, this is when you tap into the Earth's heat to provide very efficient low carbon heating and cooling to multiple buildings connected through a network of pipes. And we plan to meet regularly with Northwest Natural to understand the evolution of their geothermal pilot project in Vancouver, Washington, both to understand, what types of legislative or other factors might be needed for a project like this to pencil in Eugene. And finally, number 3 is state state preemption laws are restricting local governments' ability to regulate fossil fuel use. 26 states have already passed such laws. Oregon saw similar legislation in 2023, but it stalled. In Washington, a recent initiative, Initiative 2066, passed in November, prohibiting not only restrictions on gas, but also the ability for cities to incentivize electrification. So this is very concerning to us because it takes away our home rule authority and our ability to implement many of our climate actions. So staff will continue tracking these trends and their implications. In summary, we are beginning to implement projects to advance our decarb goals. We are supporting and tracking projects led by our partners, as well as tracking policy development in other jurisdictions. And we plan to provide another update as part of our CAP 2.0 update this spring. So we've got plenty of time now. We are interested to hear your reaction and welcome your feedback and questions. What would be particularly helpful for staff is to hear how this is landing for you so we can make sure we're on the right track.
Thank you very much for that summary. It embraces a lot of work in a few succinct points, but it's interesting to me. I think, as always, we realize how sort of incremental this work is, and there are pieces that you move forward on. So, kind of pretty concerned about your report on the larger landscape and the potential prohibitions of that would restrict local authority. I'm glad you're going to track that, because that's a big piece. But really very interested in the connection between, the housing that we build and how we might enable that housing to be as energy efficient as possible and using new energy sources. So I'm opening the floor for counselors, other counselors who have questions or comments, want to weigh in. Jennifer?
Thank you, guys. Once again, I really appreciated the packet. It was very easy to read and thorough, as always. First, I wanted to really thank you in the packet, and you had it in the presentation too, but seeing the grants, not just that we're doing here in the city, but across the community and from our different partners. I really enjoyed that part of the information, because it was so great to see all the different things and how we're bringing money into our community, not just here at the city, but all over our community. So I really enjoyed that part and I didn't expect it, so that was great. I guess the second thing, this is landing very well. Thank you for asking. I think a lot of this makes sense. You guys are obviously very realist. You're like, what can I do that's going to actually be accomplishable? And I really appreciate that's how you approach this work and what you bring to us. A lot of these have to do with communication, right? Two-way communication, right? We're giving out communication, but we're also bringing in a lot of information from our community. And I also really like that we've talked about it on this council a lot, how we really want to emphasize more communication and how can we do that. And so I'm really glad you guys are putting a lot of effort into that bucket. I had a question on the home energy auditing. I'm wondering, do we know how much this is being used currently with our kind of, like, if people want to, voluntary program? Yeah, like, are people utilizing it? Is it happening very often, or is it kind of just like a one here and there?
So from the city's voluntary program, they are getting, and we have an annual report. We've started to actually develop an annual report for that I could share with council. I don't have a copy with me today. Okay. I think since 2018, there have been something like 295 projects that have been done at around 140, 150 houses over that time. It's relatively small because, one, the students are providing the labor for this program, and so it's really only run in the spring, getting people to actually sign up and doing it. But we do I'm getting more calls periodically from people either wanting to participate in this program or wanting to know if there is somebody they could hire to actually come in and do an audit themselves to do that. But I think because of the voluntary nature, because we're focusing on renters primarily, there's less opportunity for actually doing something about that project. So I think locally, There's not a ton of appetite for it just because it is voluntary, and I don't think a lot of people know about that. I think one of the things we learned during engagement was that certain people, landlords, for example, didn't know they could actually get one for a rental property that they might be managing. And so I think part of what, we're interested in is, do people know about this, even the voluntary version of this? And we've been getting, feedback from people up in Washington who are looking at this either as a point of lease, as a requirement, or for something that's voluntary, who are very interested in the voluntary approach that we're taking here as a model for what they're trying to do in some of their jurisdictions as well. But no, the participation is pretty small.
Okay. Yeah, interesting. Okay, thank you. I'm just curious about that. All right, so I don't have anything else at this point. I'll wait to see what my colleagues think, you guys.
Okay, Matt, and then Randy.
Thank you, Mayor. And thank you, Councilor Ye, for pointing out the home energy score piece. I was going to hone in on that as well. So I will be brief. My reaction is enthusiastic. Thank you. How it's landing. This is timely, it's clear, it's encouraging, and it's critically important work. Thank you. And my feedback. I'm going to now hone in on emissions standards. Is there, as you're looking at other jurisdictions' policies, there are a couple communities in Oregon and of course throughout the West Coast that have a smog check program through the DMV. Is there any appetite within your department, or have there been discussions of partnering with the Department of Motor Vehicles in regards to some sort of a municipal partnership, a smog check program within our city boundaries?
We have not had those discussions thus far about that. That's something I would probably want to talk to El Rapo about to understand a little bit more. But no, the short answer is no, we haven't had those discussions.
Okay. I happen to know someone who serves on the El Rapo board. Ian, I'd be thrilled to follow up with you in that regard. And Danielle and Ian, I just want to underscore my enthusiasm for this work and my deep gratitude. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Randy, and then Mike.
Thank you, Mayor, and thank you very much for the presentation. I think you answered a lot of the questions that we had asked before. I think there's some you probably can't answer yet just because we're still evolving. A question I do have is about the wiring new structures so that they at least can be fully electrified. And the reason I'm asking this question is my wife and I live in a house that was built in the early 2000s. It was built with natural gas, which was being pushed at the time. And since then, we've installed both a mini split for an upstairs area, as well as replaced a central AC unit with a variable speed heat pump, high efficiency heat pump. And we had to do a lot of wiring to make that happen, which, for some could be a barrier. And then it's not quite as attractive because you're dealing with a lot of conduit outside of walls where, built at the same time the house is being built. That could all be internalized, and I'm guessing less expensive. Do we have an idea, though, to retrofit a house, and I'll just take like a 2,000 square foot house, what that would cost, just so we have an idea of context of what we would be looking at for somebody to be, now I'm talking about retrofitting rather than new construction. And I think it would be interesting to know what that costs and what it costs for new construction.
Thank you for that question, Councilor Groves. I think the short answer is I don't think we have good local data on that in terms of the retrofits. Broadly, if we're looking at new construction versus retrofits, it's a lot cheaper to actually do it from front because you can design into that. I know the building just south of us, the Heartwood, did this where they wired it to be electric ready, expecting a future that's going to be all electric. So I've heard for that. It depends on the building. Multi-unit commercial is going to be very different than a single family residential. But for multi-unit, it can be 3 to 5%, I'm hearing, in terms of a cost premium, but it depends on where you kind of make that decision in your design phase. For residential, I'd have to talk to somebody about that to get better data on that. I don't have good data on that. I think one of the things that we're interested in is trying to get better local specific granular data to do some of these analyses on there. I think if you're looking at an existing house, it can depend on what you're actually trying to do. If you're doing a fuel switch, if you have button and tube, if you have something that's kind of really older wiring, it's going to be probably a much more expensive proposition than a newer house. It's going to depend if you're fuel switching. If you're going from baseboard that's electric to electric heat pump, you might actually be able to use the same type of panel. You might not have to actually do an upgrade. You might not actually have to get the wiring. So I think there's probably a number of things that we need probably better examples of data on. I think one of the things that we're looking at from this BSEP project, the Bethel Clean Energy Project, is by doing more houses, we can actually get more on-the-ground data to better understand exactly those types of things, to understand what the cost differences are, to understand what implications are in terms of what upgrades are going to be needed, as a way to think about, as we try to position ourselves for money, what are the costs that we have to cover? So we're thinking about ways in which we can cover this cost gap that we know exists, and we're trying to get better local data to help make those decisions.
You went exactly where I'm going with on this. You know, we're going to be discussing revenue options later. And I mean, when we discuss revenue options, it's kind of nice to know what our targets are and what it would take to actually to do that. So I'm hoping that's information we can get in the future. It doesn't have to be dialed in exactly, because I understand also my very first house had oil heat, and I converted it to an electric heat pump in 1983, 84, somewhere in there. And I had to put a whole new panel in because it was an older house. And so that would cost more than just using an existing power that has enough of a service. But again, it would be nice to know what some of these numbers are, especially when we're looking at people with lower income trying to make conversions, if that's the path they choose. I think that's all I have for now, Mayor. I too will reserve a right to come back depending on what other colleagues ask. Thank you very much.
All right, great. Mike and then Greg.
Thank you, Mayor. Daniel, you mentioned our local participation in an energy audit, like Councilor Ye was referring to there. You mentioned that being voluntary, but with the potential at some future point of being mandatory. I was wondering, do you imagine that being a state mandate or a local one?
Thanks for your question. There's a current motion out from City Council to explore making this a local requirement at, for rented households. So at time of lease. Do you want to correct me on that?
It'd be for homeowners. So there's a motion to explore and do engagement.
I'm sorry, there was a motion, what?
There's a current motion for staff to go and explore what a point of sale home energy score policy might look like. And so that's what we're going to be doing engagement on in the spring, is to go.
When you
talk
say
to-
a motion, I'm sorry, there was a council
Yes,
motion
there's a council motion.
passed to
Yes.
direct you to do
Yes.
that, is
It's
what
a
you're
company-
saying?
That's what I meant.
I've been delayed in implementing this, but yes, that's a motion that I'm going to respond to in the spring, to basically bring back information about what we learned from having this conversation with realtors, with builders, with other folks who are out there, just to understand where people are in this.
Okay, thanks.
Okay, Greg and then Alan.
Yeah, thanks, Mayor. I'm going to go back to slide 15, number 3, the state preemption of home rules. So we have more than half of the states that have put forth preemption laws as far as gas bans are concerned. Being on IGR, nothing like this has come up yet to us as far as any kind of proposals from any state legislators in Oregon to do a preemption ban. Now, we've already been through preemption with land use laws vis-a-vis House Bill 2001, 5 years ago. Do we anticipate there being a similar proposal coming before the legislature this February, or is anything in the works? Do you know?
Thank you for that question, Councilor Evans. There actually was a bill that was introduced in the 2023 session. It didn't get out of committee, but there was a bill to preempt local authority to do a gas ban that was in there. It didn't get out of committee, but it was in the legislature. I think we're going to track it because there have been much more of these that have been passed in the last couple of years. We're obviously in a very different national political moment now, and so there might be an interest in doing that. I have not heard of that. I actually haven't talked to Ethan Nelson about this yet, but it's something that we'd be looking at. And I think this bill that passed in Washington State is actually very concerning because it not only says you can't reduce or eliminate a particular fuel, but you also can't incentivize the thing that we're trying to do, which is to get a lower carbon, future in some of our houses. And so I think some of those limitations are a little bit concerning for us. So it's not that there is something coming in front of the legislature, but we're going to track it because it is a trend that has been emerging over the last, 3 or 4 years nationally.
Is the 2023 bill, do you think that that's going to be reintroduced, or is it going to be could be a new, quote-unquote, improved or less improved version of what came forth in 2023?
I don't have a good answer for that, but I think the Washington Initiative, which was a voter initiative, it was
That's
funded by.
the model.
Like, I think so, because it's a much more expansive thing that they're trying to do, so it could be.
Okay, that's nice to know.
Okay, Alan.
Thanks. The answer to your question is this lands with a lot of enthusiasm. Nice job. It's good to see it all in one place. I will point out that this is only part of the puzzle. 30% of the greenhouse gas emissions come from our buildings. 54%, our largest share, comes from transportation. And we don't have too much focus on that particular, the majority of our emissions. I thought the outreach you guys did was great. 800 people, 100-plus businesses. This is really a good effort to go out and talk to people, and I bet you they appreciate it as well. I certainly do. And I also appreciate the plan for leveraging the state and federal resources. The $390 billion from the Biden administration was the largest investment in climate in history. And I read recently that the Biden administration plans to contractually obligate about 80% of that monies before the next administration takes office, which should safeguard them being repealed or rolled back. I mean, they can't slow walk it all, but there's still a lot of those programs out there. And for the record, my work as the Assistant Director of the Oregon Department of Energy, I'm directly involved in all of the programs that you listed that are from the state, and many of my staff administer those programs directly. So just wanted to let people know that. I don't think that presents any conflicts, but just wanted to make sure that it was on the record. I think the communications plan and that whole effort is going to be really key, especially with regard to getting out the information about all the rebates and tax credits and things that are available for solar and heat pumps and weatherization. And I think that's really going to be a big part should be a big part of what we do to help people get and navigate through that whole process. On the home energy score, Portland and 3 other cities have adopted them, made them a requirement. There's probably more, I think we're approaching 50,000 home energy scores in the state now because of those requirements. And 5 new cities are looking at it, and also ODO's studying applying it to rentals in addition to at the sale, so at time it rents as opposed to just at the sale, to do a home energy audit. They're pretty inexpensive, and they provide a lot of really good information. Round.
Okay, anyone who hasn't had a first round want to, Lindsay? Okay.
Thank you so much. I'm really excited about your work, and I'm just always impressed by the fact that we have 2 people that can do this much. So thank you so much for such a comprehensive report and navigating all of our questions and requests and motions over time. I guess my main question is if you had, one or 2 things that you could move forward with enough funding, what would be the top of your priority list?
Yeah. Sorry, that's working now. Thanks for that question. We thought about that a lot in the last few days, like with our existing budget. Out of these 7 priorities, what could we move forward? And I think 2 of them will require substantial additional budget. Decarbonizing existing facilities, we are sort of opportunistic with that. We apply for grants. There's sort of a certain budget that gets allotted every year to fund upgrades where we can, as well as projects through capital, the CIP. And then the other one that is going to require substantial investment is expanding incentives. We can't really do that with our budget, with the general fund. But the other 5, we feel pretty confident that we can make progress on with our existing budget, with our existing staff. Later down the line, with those 5, as they evolve, they will probably require more funds. But I think right now, there's sort of these initial pieces that need to happen before we get to that like larger sum of money that's truly needed for those 5. So I don't know if Ian has anything else to add, but that's what I would say to that question.
I would have one other, which is, right now, it's a small thing, but one of the things that we heard during engagement was, particularly with the building performance standard, is that a lot of businesses and building owners don't necessarily know this is coming. And it's something that could be really impactful. And so one of the things that we're thinking about is there something that the city could do as a service to help building owners get through this process? Because I think we want this to be successful. And this is actually a way where the city can show up and say, hey, we can actually maybe help you through this process. And trying to figure out what that is, what that need is going to be something that we're going to be doing through conversation in the spring. But I think there's a really opportunity to think about how do we make this successful, because it works and it delivers on its environmental benefits by being successful. And it's something that the state is doing. And is there something that if there's a role or something that we can fill locally to do this, to help support this, that's the one that potentially could have some money if we want to provide some sort of support, helping people do energy audits, doing something like that. There are local resources we might be able to leverage as well, but that's one of those areas where I feel like there's a real good opportunity to actually partner with and work with some of our businesses and building owners in town to try and advance this policy goal.
Is that kind of the same vision you have for the incentive navigator? Are you thinking that would be a dual role?
Similar, and I think there's a lot of overlap between that. I think when we think about the navigator, I think first we want to see what the state does with its one-stop shop sort of web-based tool and see what gaps are there, and then see what other sort of more high-touch approaches would be available beyond that, and then having kind of a similar idea with businesses. I think specific to comply with this state rule would be the goal, but I think there's other appetite for businesses to better understand like what's available from eWeb, from ETO, from all these other organizations as well. So I think there is definitely overlap between those two. That seems like the opportunity to help get information in front of people and then help them kind of get through that space so they can leverage that fully.
Excellent. And I'm going to ask this next question just because I'm interested, but also because there's just so many different sources of energy we're looking at. And I don't know a lot about geothermal energy, but do you see that as a viable source here, Eugene? And what would it take to transition, or would it be more of a pilot, or does that look like, gosh, that's like a decade down the road or more?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think if your question is like geographically speaking, geologically, can we do that here? The answer is yes. Like there's already ground source heat pumps that are households are putting in. There's a really amazing pilot project between Northwest Natural and Homes for Good that's happened. So there's already like geothermal energy being used, but doing it on a network scale, that's when you connect multiple buildings within a certain block to this network of pipes. That's going to require quite a bit more, including state legislation that's different than, we can't do that yet here, but with state legislation, potentially we could. So that's why we're tracking really closely what Northwest Natural is doing in Vancouver, Washington, because Washington passed that legislation that allowed them to move forward on that pilot project. So, and I mean, yeah, the only other thing, before Ian jumps in, is we just don't know how it will pencil. It could be really expensive. So that's another reason why we're tracking that project.
Yeah, is that more of when we're building a new like subdivision, it makes the most sense to say that this is the energy source, or is this more of a retrofit in an existing neighborhood?
I think it's to be determined. I think why we're tracking these pilots is the pilots are doing both. So there's a really interesting pilot in Massachusetts where they're doing a retrofit, a renovation. And so we'll get to see cost, technology, limitation, all of that. And then a lot of the pilots in Washington are going to be new construction. So kind of charting into new territory and kind of see the differences and the challenges and opportunities for both of those things. But I think in terms of something that would occur in Eugene, I think if it happened, would be a pilot. It would be relatively small scale. The Framingham, Massachusetts pilot is huge. And so I don't know we'd see a scale like that, but I think trying to see how it would work and going from there would be the approach. But we're probably several years away from something like that happening here.
so much. You know, it's really interesting as solar almost versus geothermal, solar being, you know, here in the Pacific Northwest, maybe sometimes challenging. I'm really interested too, and I'm interested to, as we go along, for you to give us updates. So that's the last of my questions. I appreciate your work again. I'm excited for the next round of information on revenue.
Thank you. I have two counselors for a second round, but I'm just going to jump in with a, oh, did you have something you wanted to?
Clarify the motions that were passed before, but we can do that whenever you're ready. The
You
home
can-
energy
you-
motions.
You can do it. Go ahead.
So you had passed two motions. This was in November of 2021, I think. Both passed 8-0. The first one was to direct the city manager to bring back an implementation plan, including potential funding sources for the mandatory home energy score program. The second was to direct the city manager to develop additional home energy score program options for renters in alignment with CAP 2.0 action.
Okay, thank you. Yeah, some of these things happened a while ago, so thank you. I'm just going to jump into the queue for a minute, and Lindsay's question sort of reminded me of this. I'm just wondering about, in your business outreach, about the vendors of heating and cooling systems. And were they sort of part of some of that business engagement? When we think about sort of engaging customers and understanding, I mean, if the various companies that are installing these things in residential houses are sort of part of that conversation, they're the point at which they can share information with a homeowner about the cost of installing it, the benefits, so I'm just wondering, were they part of your conversations in the building industry, or?
Thanks for that question. Yeah, we talked to a few contractors, including, developers who build new, more like the vendors who come in and do, like switch out your heat pump or your water heater. And that was, what we heard was, some of them tend to be very, like might be sort of one side, like I always put in this type of water heater, I always put in this type of heat pump or furnace. But what we saw was a real opportunity to do more education directly with them about what some of the climate benefits of these different options could be. And a lot of this technology is changing really rapidly right now. So a contractor might get sort of, for lack of better words, like set in their ways of what they tend to recommend. But right now we're seeing this rapid evolution of, heat pump water heaters that are coming on the market and heat pumps that are becoming more affordable than they ever were before. And so there's this real opportunity to work with them more closely since, as you said, they, are usually who a homeowner will look to when their appliance or whatever needs to be replaced. So that was, I think it was strategy number 5 out of our original engagement, and that audience, I guess you could call it, will be central to our communications plan.
Yeah, and just one other quick comment, which is we've talked a lot about residential, but actually part of this report that excites me the most is the working with the business sectors and the potential for them, and starting with the food and beverage, the potential for them to be sharing knowledge, sharing experience. It changes the tone. So I'm very, very excited about the potential for that and some of the other building sectors. And then, thinking about builders themselves and contractors and vendors of equipment, that feels like there's a really dynamic opportunity there for them to share. And then as we think as a city about the Bold Steps Award and what that might look like in the future, there's a way to sort of dial that in a very specific way where we are recognizing the businesses that have stepped forward. So I'm really very hopeful about those business sector strategies and excited about the work that you've done and what is coming forward. Okay, with that, I have Alan and then Matt.
The local geothermal is really about, at the local scale, at the home scale, business scale, is really about space heating. The solar comparison, I think, would be utility scale geothermal to generate electricity, which requires geothermal resources of very, very hot temperatures, like the Cascades and the volcanic areas, Newberry Crater. Klamath Falls has a lot of it. OIT is actually heated, but it's not here. So we're not going to see generation of electricity by it. But I will point out the new Secretary of Energy is a geothermal guy. So hope springs eternal. I think one of the things that I wanted to focus on was we have a very limited amount of staff time and Sustainability Commission time working on all this stuff. And I would like to see us apply a bang for the buck filter to our work. And by that, I mean focusing on those actions that reduce a lot of greenhouse gases, because that's the name of the game, reducing a lot of greenhouse gases, rather than actions that save relatively or reduce relatively little greenhouse gas for our efforts, because a lot of these things take about the same amount of effort. It's just how much do you get out of it? So that's the bang for the buck kind of filter that I would like to see us apply. And that's why I commented earlier about the transportation emissions that we have, which are 54% of our emissions, which can reduce a great deal of greenhouse gas emissions, as opposed to policies like limiting natural gas in new homes, which reduce relatively little greenhouse gases, but take a lot of time and effort and generate a lot of opposition. And especially when you compare those against promoting renewable energy and energy efficiency, we get a lot more bang for the buck if we focused on those areas. Finally, I just wanted to appreciate the way that you've structured this and that prioritization of the 12 projects that you've got identified, particular projects with a good work plan. That's excellent, and 7 by us and 5 by our other partners. I think that's a really good way to focus in on this. Can you guys explain what the next steps are? This is about decarbonizing buildings, and the commercial sector has bigger than the residential sector. What are the next steps about working with our businesses on decarbonizing buildings?
I mean, I think 2 of them are the 7 that we have there. And I think one is, as Mayor talked about, starting like a sector-based approach to doing peer-to-peer learning and understanding that a lot of businesses are already doing things, and can they learn from each other? And because it's kind of a ready-made sector, we're going to start with food manufacturers and then kind of go from there. But the first thing is to kind of go to one of their events, talk about it, understand like what would be helpful for you, and use that as a way to think about ways in which we can bring resources. I've also been talking to the on-site energy program at the U.S. Department of Energy. They have these technical assistance areas there. Is that something that could be brought here and have some sort of sector-based learning cohort? So that's one of the areas, is to figure out what they're doing, what's working, what they can share. The other is to go back to the building performance standard and figure out how that can be leveraged here, both to make sure that it's implemented successfully, and then are there opportunities to do something beyond that as the state. So I think those are the 2 initial areas that we're trying to focus on. And I think a lot of what we tried to do through this is to try and build these foundational places where we can have these conversations, we can exchange information in 2 ways and build from there. And a lot of it is sort of building those relationships and making sure that the city is sort of, in addition to having a 2-way conversation, as Councilor Ye talked about, that we are hearing back from some of these businesses to understand we have ideas that might work, but we want to hear from these businesses to understand what is going to be most helpful for them. And I think the third thing is the idea of some type of navigator service, just help businesses understand what incentives are available to them and allow them to take advantage of that more efficiently. So I think those are the 3 things that we're focusing on buildings within the business community.
Good. I think those are the right 3 things, and I think that the navigator and the communications about the financial incentives that are available to businesses, the tax credits that will hopefully survive the next administration, and I think they will, are help you pay for 30% of the cost of doing a project. So there's a lot that people can do that gets incentives to do the decarbonization, and those are the 3 areas that I think I would focus on.
Yeah, I think like the on-site energy program, that they'll do a free audit at your business. And so like making people aware of some of those technical resources that are out there that could possibly give them better information.
I think the last thing I wanted to add that I didn't spend any time talking about is Bring and the Chamber. So Bring has this Rethink program that is already engaging many businesses towards making sustainability-related improvements. And the Chamber, I mean, is just a huge asset in our community. Their strength is really convening businesses together. And so we're really excited to partner with them in the next year to sort of work together to leverage those strengths and how we can bring our expertise, help develop programming, maybe help connect them to experts in these different policy areas, and as well as leverage their strengths of being able to convene and bring businesses to the table. So again, I think that just points to like, we're really trying to leverage partnerships through this work and play to our strengths.
Okay, thank you, Matt, and then we're going to have to wrap this up.
Thanks, Mayor. The conversation about commercial and business decarbonization has sparked a series of questions and ideas. So I'm very interested in the Q1 outreach effort, workshops, next steps. Thanks for honing in on the Rethink Biz certification. But both as I understand it, that piece and the bold steps celebrate the winners, the folks the few who are doing really, really well. I wonder, not only how do you provide the incentives for folks who need to readjust, but how do we share that information with the public at large? How do you envision sharing a commercial energy score, if at all, with the public? Is there an opportunity for a pro-energy efficiency letter grade, perhaps, or a blue book online, or a green book, rather, online, to indicate who's doing well, who's an A or B in the community, and who are the C's, D's, and F's? How do we share that information at large? I'm thinking of the health department's program in the state of California. There's literally a letter grade at every restaurant you go to, and since the hotel, lodging, restaurant industry, or the restaurant industry is the first foray into this conversation in the new year, I wonder if there's an opportunity for a City of Eugene letter grade, a sticker, or some way to share to the public as we go and spend our money. I, for one, would be far more likely to spend at an A or B than I would for someone who's just not participating in this program.
Yeah, you raise a good point, and I think that came up quite a bit through our engagement. You know, like historically, we've been celebrating like the 2 or 3 few who are going above and beyond. One way I can kind of try to answer your question is Bring is looking at developing a tiered system of awards so that it wouldn't just be like 1 or 2 winners or the handful of people who completed the full program, but how can we recognize people along the way and, keep like, not just recognize them at the end, but like along the way. And so I don't want to speak too much about what they're planning to roll out, but they are looking at some new different ways to do that. And I think the Chamber has also been really excited about, being better about how can we be better, have more consistent messaging across our different agencies about amplifying those stories of upgrades that are happening at different commercial levels and stuff. So I don't think there's a specific A, B, or C program that's coming out, but we are trying to brainstorm together about ways we can recognize all those different levels of achievement.
That's great. Thank you, and I hope that my feedback is helpful. Thanks.
Could I add to that real quick? The home energy score label actually does it like the yellow things for appliances, so it rates the house against other houses. So you do get essentially that.
Right, I'm talking about
Yeah.
the commercial.
Okay.
And
Yeah.
Thank you. We're long on time, and we have another pretty robust work session so thank you very much. You've actually triggered, obviously, a lot of interest and a lot of conversation, and we're really excited about what you've brought to us. So thank you for really wonderful work. I really appreciate it. And with that, we'll just make the transition to our next agenda item. And I'll turn it over to the manager.
Sure thing. Our second agenda item is really a follow-up. Teamwork makes the dream work. Right here on the mute button. Follow up on some of the work we did on revenue and very specific to the climate and sustainability work. So I'm joined here with our CFO, Twyla Miller, who's going to walk us through that after a small transition period.
On? Okay, there we go. Good evening, I'm Twyla Miller, your Chief Financial Officer, and I'm here to talk to you about climate and sustainability revenue options this evening. So tonight, I'll talk a little bit about the background with the revenue advisors, some of the revenue options that they put forward, equity considerations, and then also a few conversations council will be having over the next couple of months as they think about finances in the budget and priorities. So this was the motion from your July 17th meeting, and so we're here today to talk to you about these things. So the Revenue Advisor Group was a group that was formed to learn about the financial and funding issues facing the city and to provide advice and a community perspective to the city manager in relation to new revenue options. The group had 10 members, including Councilors Zelinka and Councilors Leach, Budget Committee members, and also community members. The group met 7 times between December 2023 and April of 2024, and they received information on the state's property tax system and the changes made in the 90s. In the 90s. And other financial impacts that impacted the structural imbalance in the general fund, where revenues weren't keeping pace with expenditures. They also received the staff revenue report that was submitted to the city manager in the fall of 2023, and this had over 40 revenue options in the report. So the revenue advisors reviewed the revenue options to consider which options should be viable to address the funding issues shown here. So the first is the critical funding gap. This is the funding gap in the general fund that began in July of 2024. This was the most pressing issue due to the short time frame in which we had to develop solutions. The next was the areas at risk. These are areas that we've funded on a one-time basis. This includes a range of things such as unhoused response, human services funding, our levies for parks and library, and the community safety payroll tax. And then there was the area of new and/or expanded services. This includes affordable housing, and then what we're here to talk about this evening, climate and sustainability options. Additionally, as our community continues to grow, there's a need for service expansion and for things such as adding fire stations to our community. As the revenue advisors considered the funding options in the staff revenue report, they selected 15 options to focus on more as possible solutions for these funding areas. The revenue criteria on the right-hand side of the slide shows the criteria they use to evaluate options. This includes things like the revenue raised, administrative effort to implement, and community impacts. These were considered as each option was discussed. While there were a range of viewpoints across the group, several revenue options were selected for each funding issue category as revenue options that were viable strategies. So these were the revenues that were identified for the area of new and expanded services. There were some revenues that were identified as funding solutions for more than one funding issue. This would include local option levy, restaurant tax, franchise fees, payment in lieu of tax, and the urban renewal frozen base option. For instance, the levy, the franchise fee, and the frozen base were identified as sources for both the critical funding gap and new and expanded services. As the revenue advisors discussed the franchise fee option, the natural gas supplier tax was discussed under that umbrella term. But these are different revenue sources, and I will cover both today along with the climate impact fee, and as those are the options with the most direct nexus to climate and sustainability efforts. I'll also talk a bit about the local option levy, as this was identified as a possible bridge strategy. So first, we'll start with the local option levy. This is a temporary property tax that is paid by all owners of taxable property within the city limits. This was, again, identified as a possible bridge strategy, but it's not a sustainable revenue source as the levy needs to be renewed at the end of each cycle. Levy revenues could be used to support climate and sustainability-related city services. Levies are variable for yield, but are subject to compression under Measure 5. Currently, 34 cents remains under the general government cap, which would equate to just over $6 million per year. Council would need to pass a resolution, and a majority of voters approve the measure in a May or November election. And as property taxes are administered by the county, there's a low administrative effort. Due to the compression limitations, including the impact of levies by other jurisdictions, there is limited scalability, and again, this isn't a long-term solution. Next, we'll talk about the climate impact fee. They're generally structured as a one-time fee charged to mitigate the impact of emissions created through development-related activities. These fees have been used to help communities invest in projects that lower a community's greenhouse gas emissions. Entities that have structured the fee to include fee reductions and exemptions based on greener choices have realized reduced revenue yield over time as a community's building stock converts to renewable energy. When the staff revenue report was created in the summer of 2023, there were not other Oregon jurisdictions that had a climate impact fee, and there were questions in the report about the need for additional legal analysis to determine the viability of an impact fee within Oregon. The concern was if the fee was considered a systems development charge, then the revenues could not be used for climate-related expenditures, as state law does not allow for an SDC to be charged to new or redevelopment for climate-related needs. However, recently, both Bend and Ashland have begun to consider climate impact fees and are in the investigative process of this determination. Bend is just starting their conversation, and their council has sent a concept to a committee for further evaluation. Ashland has also conducted some analysis on cost per household basis, and are also undertaking an analysis of new residential starts to understand how many are gas versus heat pumps, to understand potential yield. It is possible that council could enact a climate impact fee by ordinance in Eugene. Significant legal review would need to occur to determine how this could be structured to be available for this purpose. This would be a new revenue source, and administrative efforts would be dependent upon the complexity of the fee and the program structure. It's estimated that it would take 1 to 2 years to implement a climate impact fee. So Ian and our sustainability staff have made some preliminary estimates for the potential cost of a climate impact fee for residential homes, estimating the life cycle natural gas CO2 emissions using a 16-year lifespan for appliances. Under this methodology, for a small to medium residence, the fee would range from about $9,800 to $12,000 per residence. For larger homes over 3,000 square feet, the fee is estimated to range from $16,000 to $23,000. Other more refined approaches could be utilized, but would need more evaluation. I wanted to touch briefly here about the franchise fee and a natural gas supplier tax. In the revenue report, one summary actually captured elements of both revenue sources, but they are different. A franchise fee is negotiated with the franchise, and a negotiated agreement with the utility, and it's assessed for the privileged use of right-of-way. And a natural gas supplier tax is a tax levied on natural gas suppliers based on gross revenue, and no franchise agreement is enacted. So we'll talk a little bit here about the natural gas supplier tax. It is estimated that a 1% increase in the natural gas supplier tax would generate between $300,000 and $400,000 of revenue each year. The city currently has a supplier tax ordinance with the rate set at 5% of gross revenues, which could be changed. The cost impact on businesses and residents should be considered as it is expected the cost would be passed along to customers. The City of Gresham currently charges a 10% utility license fee on Portland General Electric and Northwest Natural Gas. Currently, supplier tax revenues are housed in the general fund and are not dedicated for a specific program. They support general fund services. Council could direct staff to utilize any increase over the existing rate to be dedicated for sustainability efforts. And I did want to touch upon a few other sources that have come up in council conversations. As The first presentation talked about staff are continuing to pursue state and federal funding opportunities for this work, such as Greenhouse Gas Reduction Fund, which aims to leverage financing for clean energy and climate projects, and the Community Climate Investment Funds under the state's reinstituted Climate Protection Program, which is expected to generate annual funding for climate projects in Oregon. Also, Senate Bill 844, which created a voluntary incentive program for Oregon's natural gas utilities to invest in projects that reduce greenhouse gas emissions. And utilities can still take advantage of this program, but staff have not been able to find any information on projects approved at this time to date. Northwest Natural Gas has proposed projects in prior years, most recently a hydrogen project in Eugene in 2021, which was withdrawn by the utility. And there was also a question about bonds, about the city using its bonding authority to create a loan fund to support community transition costs. There are constitutional limitations on borrowing funds that benefit private entities that would prevent us from implementing this solution. However, the city could issue bonds for decarbonization of government buildings. There are a range of ways to ensure that funding is focused on BIPOC and low-income communities. Staff have conducted research and found several communities that have created climate-related funds that focus investment in historically marginalized communities that provide insight on how we might develop a program, if that's council's desire. So the first is Portland. The Clean Energy Fund has funding from a tax on large retailers to provide grants to community organizations for various green energy projects. Grants are focused on renewable energy, energy efficiency, and workforce development, specifically in marginalized communities. With their point-based system, projects that demonstrate clear benefits to priority populations receive higher scores. In Minneapolis, the Climate Legacy Initiative began this past summer with a city-led funding program to support climate action goals. The initiative is funded through increases in utility franchise fees. The city also has 2 environmental justice areas known as green zones. These are neighborhoods with more concentrated pollution and racial, political, and economic marginalization. These zones are identified as top priority areas from investment for the city, and at least 40% of the funding goes to these areas. Next is Cook County. They use existing county funds and ARPA funds to improve housing conditions of vulnerable communities by addressing environmental health risks like lead exposure, indoor air quality, and energy efficiency in low-income households. The program is open to residents earning up to 120% of area median income who reside in high-risk zip codes for pediatric lead poisoning or in a disadvantaged census tract as defined by the federal government. The county has partnered with a nonprofit to administer the program. And then finally, there's Denver, Colorado. Their Climate Protection Fund is funded by a 0.25 local sales tax. The program focuses on funding programs that reduce greenhouse gas emissions while advancing equity and enhancing community resilience. Projects are prioritized that directly benefit low-income communities and communities of color, with 50% of the funds allocated to projects that benefit marginalized communities for a range of allowable uses. So many of the programs have aspects such as dedicated funds, public accountability and reporting. Some use advisory boards, and all set clear allocation targets for their outcomes. A program could be established in Eugene to dedicate new revenue into a fund, earmarking resources for BIPOC and low-income communities. Funds could be specified for a range of uses, including weatherizing homes, electrifying homes, and to provide financial assistance or grants to low-income homeowners for energy upgrades or other efforts. Staff would need to evaluate further, but could develop a program in conjunction with city staff, so the Office of Equity and Community Engagement, Housing, Community Development, and local partners. Analysis would need to occur to gather data and create a draft program that would address considerations that are shown on the right hand of the slide. Staff estimate it would take about a year after an ordinance was enacted to enact the program, and roll out community outreach for a low-income application process that could be funded starting in year 2. So now I'd just like to take it kind of back to the beginning. You have 3 funding areas that council is currently considering. The next steps in some of our council conversations begin this Wednesday. We will be coming back with a financial condition update. And then you have 2 council work sessions that begin in January to discuss budget priorities and considerations. And with that, I will leave it open for questions and conversation.
Okay, thank you very much. I'm going to open up the floor for folks if they have questions or comments. I certainly have one thing that I don't completely understand, but I'd actually like to open the floor for councilors first. Do you have Randy, go for it.
Thank you, Twyla. I appreciate your work on this. You did what we asked you to do. I am concerned about new fees right now when we're looking at other new fees, precincts fees upon fees, and people are already feeling taxed to death. So that's a concern of mine. I did want to follow up, though, when you were talking about Gresham, and if I understood you correctly, they have a natural gas supplier tax or a version of that? And if that's correct, does Gresham receive SILT revenue from PG&E?
You repeat the second half of your question again?
Yes,
Councilor Burris?
I'm curious, I understand Gresham is maybe adding a larger fee here, but do they also receive SILT revenue, contribution in lieu of taxes like we paid, or EWEB pays to us? Do they receive that kind of revenue, or is this a standalone?
No, they have fees assessed against both PGE and against Northwest Natural.
Right, but do they also receive SILT funding? So like there's the
PG&E.
fee, and then
In addition, I do
SILT.
not, I would have to check that. I do not believe so, because they're actually, it's a privilege tax on PG&E operating in their territory. So I believe they just have those 2 fees. I don't think they do SILT as well.
Okay.
I would have to check that, but I don't think that's true.
Got it. Well, we receive a fair amount of revenue from EWEB through the SILT funding. So anyway, I just wanted to acknowledge that and ask that question. That's all I have at this time. Thank you very much.
Okay, Alan and then Mike.
The reason we do a SILT is because EWEB is actually a governmental entity, and you can't do a franchise fee on a governmental entity. So they do franchise fees on those utilities, and we do a contribution in lieu of taxes from the municipal utility. Yeah, both, and Northwest Natural, both private, so they do franchise fees. I guess it's been over 3 years since I put together a work session poll on climate and homelessness revenue. Hopefully time is right for a good idea. You got yours, Mayor, at the very end. In particular, I wanted to investigate a bond or a levy combining climate and homelessness, figuring that we could build a coalition that would generate enough yes votes to move that forward. I also remember that the original negotiations with Northwest Natural, part of that package of creating revenue for climate actions or greenhouse gas reduction projects was increasing the franchise fee. Still think that's a good idea. Just as a kind of aside, I'm still very interested in using the 0.5% fee that we left on the table for the construction excise tax. That would create over $1 million a year for affordable housing. It's pretty clear to me that the only affordable housing we get is not from the marketplace. It's only from subsidized affordable housing units. So the CET, along with the federal and the state monies, create the funds for affordable housing units in Eugene, and that's it. So increasing it would double our CET number of affordable housing units, as many other cities have already done. I guess similarly, the climate impact fee would be assessed at the beginning. It's a one-time fee when you build something that would be similar to that and would generate annual revenue for greenhouse gas emission reduction projects. And I think all these ideas are particularly important given we're not going to see any additional support from the federal government. It's going to be at the local and at the state level. So this discussion becomes more important as we move forward into the next several years. If we're going to do anything on climate.
Okay, thank you. Mike?
Thank you, Mayor. Like my colleague Randy, I agree entirely. I would not like to see our council creating new fees upon new fees upon new fees, because I think it's a really bad way to try and work with our community. One of the things that has always interested me is something we gave up on quite a long time ago. And I don't want to give up on it. I want to find out if it's still possible. The idea of helping especially low-income homes have weatherization that decreases their utility costs and decreases carbon release in our environment seems like a win-win to me still. We're about to see an 8% increase already in the cost of energy in our community this next year. And that's of substance. I would like to see us doing things to help with that. And I guess my question is for the manager. We kind of declared war on Northwest Natural Gas a while back, and they stopped having productive conversations with us about what we might do together. I am still interested in a Senate Bill 844 agreement to have them spending their money to help weatherize low-income homes in our community. What would it take for them to sit down and have conversations with us again about an agreement? In your opinion?
Always like that last part.
Yeah.
Oh, okay, now I can say
Yeah,
anything.
what do you think it would take?
Yeah, I mean, I think that conversation, we were pretty far along with that when you started discussing sort of a electrification strategy that caused them to want to pause and wait and see what was going to happen with that. So I
Called them
wouldn't.
evil, frankly, but yeah, anyway.
Yeah, well, so when you say "we," I'm assuming what you mean is we,
Corporately,
you.
yes.
Because I think from a staff level, we were working pretty well trying to come up with a solution that would allow a franchise agreement that we thought you would approve, which would be including a number of things, while you're like dragging the cobwebs out, but a number of things that would also reduce carbon emissions. And so the 844 came up as part of that. So I think Northwest Natural would have, this is my opinion, Northwest Natural would have to have some trust that this council actually wanted to pursue a franchise agreement with them, and that you were open to doing that and open to the possibility of that, and that you never directed me not to pursue that, but I think the conversation has gone far enough that I think if I was in Northwest Natural's shoes, I would want to see you sort of advocating for us to go back to the table and continue to do that work.
Do you think it would be out of line for me as a counselor looking for information to ask you or someone in your staff to ask them what it would take?
Yeah, and staff does continue to meet with them because we work with them and they work in the right of way. And I know Assistant City Manager Rodriguez and the Public Works Director have been meeting with them, and they're just not here tonight to be able to give you any kind of an update.
I, for one, would like to see us improve our working relationship, and I would like it to result in monies that come into the city that help our residents pay less for their electricity. And I'm in favor of chasing down that road as a part of this conversation. Thank you.
Thank you. We have Jennifer and then Lindsay.
Thank you, Mayor. So thank you for coming today with this presentation. I really appreciate you kind of breaking down the different options. And again, for anyone that was on the revenue team that might be watching, I really appreciate all those meetings that you went through, digging through our different options to give us some good advice. I wanted to, at the very end, you started talking about this idea of this potential program that we could create. And I was wondering if maybe it's Ian that could dig into this just a little bit. I know we don't have a ton of time, but so you're envisioning the first year would be kind of a planning, outreach situation, and then it would take, and then after about somewhere around 12 months, you would start actually implementing a program, that it would take that long.
Yes, I mean, the idea was just to try and think about this, not that I consider this a fait accompli, but to think through what this might look like if this were to move forward. And so, yes, I think it was working with partners, trying to identify things that already exist. You know, Homes for Good already does weatherization. There are already programs that exist in this community. How can we leverage and supplement that? That would be the goal, to figure out what's there, what is the stack, what is the gap. And so using that to try and figure out what this might look like, look at what's been done elsewhere to try and think through like what might apply to Eugene. And so it felt like having those conversations, talking to Minneapolis and some other cities who have done this, it took them about a year. And so trying to learn from what they did, work through all the different things you have to do, it felt like it might take that much time to sort of set something up and get things moving while sort of thinking through maybe the different ways in which you might be able to spend that money.
And are you envisioning this navigator, this that we keep talking about, as maybe being in charge of this program, or current staff, or?
The thought was to bring on some type of navigator function, whether it would be a staff person or whether it be something contracted outside. I think my initial thinking was to have something outside because they've done this. They can kind of teach us what to do. They can help us set up our systems, but to have something that then sort of maybe migrates within the city over a period of time once we have our systems kind of going and moving forward.
So this maybe like you don't have this yet, and that's fine. But do you have an idea of what level of financial resources you would need to get this going?
And it depends on what we want to do.
Okay, that's
So I
fair.
think, I think, so there's a number of ways this could be done. I think, you know, again, talking to the previous session, when I mentioned to Councilor Groves, one of the things that we want to learn from this Bethel Clean Energy project is like what it would take to do a water heater to a heat pump water heater, or do other things to understand like the different like avenues that we could do. And if we want to do something really deep, like weatherization and windows and some type of really intensive thing, a deep energy retrofit, that's one pathway. If we wanted to just do heat pumps, or we wanted to just do heat pump water heaters, that would be very different. So it really kind of depends on maybe what the program wants to focus on, but we could do this in a number of different ways in terms of thinking about what this would be. As an example, we've been doing some preliminary analysis and some conversations with a group that could be a navigator, could be this program navigator in Eugene. And they did a little bit of analysis for us. And we think for about $1 million, we could do a deep energy retrofit. So meaning like really going in and weatherization and everything across the board in the house. We could do for about $900,000, about 50 or 60 homes to do that. So that's kind of just looking at what the gap is, what's available from, you know, various utilities, what may be available in the tax code, thinking through that. So that's just an example of one way we could think about doing it, but it really depends on kind of where we want to focus. And I think some of the analysis and some of the pilots that we're trying to do are going to help us think through what these different pathways might be.
Great, that's very helpful. You know, I think for me, one of the things that's very I'm interested in is this natural gas supplier tax and increasing it and taking those increases and putting it into a fund that we would be able to start these programs and get these things going, because we know that, but while they all cost money, right, the cost of doing nothing is very high. And it seems like a reasonable place to start, while I also like many of Alan's ideas that he's been working on for a long time, I know, to get more money. Doing a whole bunch of different things at once feels a little too far for me, but starting small and building up our program, I think, is doable in our community. I'm wondering what would be helpful for you guys at this step. I know that this is a conversation we want to continue in January. So is there something that would be helpful for us to give you today? Or is this enough?
I think this is helpful. I think just knowing if that's an area of focus to kind of hone in on, it's probably enough to bring back as part of a larger budget priority conversation.
Well, obviously, I can't speak for all my colleagues, but it is very much of interest to me. I think it's the right path, and to at least continue to look at and to focus on and get more information. So thank you, guys.
I'll give you a second round, but not yet. Okay. Lindsay?
Thank you, Mayor, and thank you, Tyler, for the presentation. I'm going to make it quick. I agree with Jen. I think the pathway forward is looking more deeply at that or the supplier tax, seeing how we can increase that. It's been done across the state several times successfully, where we can implement a navigator. It's really crucial how the community has access to a lot of different incentives and the information out there. It's hard to access them, and it's hard to navigate which ones fit. Like Councilor Clark was saying, oh, well, like, let's help people with weatherization. Well, eWeb won't give incentives for weatherization if you're not an eWeb heating, client. Like, there's all of these different pieces that make it hard. So I think that navigator position is incredibly important, and then targeting the people who really need it the most. Our low-income and BIPOC community, let's focus on equity and need. And so I'm really interested in getting more information about that moving forward. I'm interested in looking at the climate impact fee. Obviously, we need a lot more information and a deep dive into what is that and what would that look like here. I'm not necessarily ready to move forward with a levy. I don't think it's the right time for that. But I really appreciate your work on this and look forward to continuing these conversations.
Okay, thank you. So I have Mike and Randy both for second round and Alan for a second round. Okay, and anyone who hasn't had a first, and we're almost out of time. So this has to be a lightning round. We've got 3 minutes and 3 counselors.
Thank you, Mayor. I was just wanting to ask, what did you understand my colleagues to ask? And if we had need of a vote in order to bring back a specific thing for council action or not?
I was anticipating that this would be one part of a larger budget priority conversation in January. I wouldn't anticipate bringing something back at that first session. We would need direction to bring something back more formally, but we can include this as part of that as we think of the 3 funding categories and where council would like to give direction to staff.
Thank you. So it will come back as a potential option idea, but not a new direction that council is pursuing at this point. Is that correct?
Correct. It would be part of that conversation.
Okay. I personally want to say that in an environment where costs are rising the way they are, and in an environment where we already know eWeb goes up 8% next year, to think about doubling that particular fee on people who have natural gas to their home is something that I would fight personally in the community to try and reverse if need be. I think it's the absolute wrong way to go when we can do it by cooperating and working with our partners to be able to fund similar actions rather than imposing it on them. And I think that's the wiser way to go. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Randy?
Thank you, Mayor. 2 quick points. One, as we continue talking about electrification, I really think, and I've said this before, eWeb needs to be at the table with us having this discussion. The second thing, the supplier tax that we're talking about being placed on Northwest Natural, that means it's going to be placed on our residents, our businesses, and our constituents. They're the ratepayers, they're the ones who are going to get stuck with this. We just have to be really mindful with what we do, and that realizing all these different financial things we're talking about, the increased cost on the individual, need to be looked at together. Because it's real easy to take off, well, this is just this much, this one's just that much, but you put them together, it's real money for people that can't always afford it. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. And Alan?
Yeah, I was going to say something similar, that an enormous amount of Northwest Natural customers are low to moderate income people, and it's difficult for them to have increases on top of the utility increases that are being put onto them. So in that vein, if we did a franchise fee or a natural gas supplier tax, I would take a portion of that and have it be dedicated towards rental assistance. We took part of that, we did that with CET, we took part of it and went and what affordable housing is, but we took part of it and put it into rental assistance. And I think that that's already built in. We could take some of the franchise fee and put it into that as well. But as far as strategy goes forward, I think starting with simple things that are administratively simple to do, that we can start small. I agree with Jennifer said, start small and kind of build things up. Learn more about the climate impact fee and the levies, how we can do those over time potentially when the time is right. But starting with the things that we can do pretty quickly and administratively.
Yes.
I just want to clarify one thing on the low income and gas usage. As far as I understand, and I could be corrected on this, but through their low income needs assessment, Northwest Natural actually doesn't gather income or household information. So I don't know if we actually have good information on what households in Eugene are on gas or not on gas.
That's an interesting problem. Okay, thank you. Thank you very much for this presentation. I do want to thank you for providing a cluster of work sessions on climate in my last Monday night work session. So very satisfying to have this come back, closing the loop, and a sort of a conversation that is really the middle of the conversation, right? This is a progress report, and we actually have more revenue and financial conversations ahead. So thank you very, very much for all the work and the discussion. And with that, we are adjourned.